I love it in the morning. Like whoever comes in first to the office will flip the farm. And I just imagine them in overalls with a piece of wheat in their mouth every morning, just like they're doing the farming, you know? Hello and welcome to the Open Hardware Manufacturing Podcast, the podcast about making open source hardware. My name is Stephen Haas.
And I'm Lucian Chapar.
And today we're talking about managing a print farm. We have been running a print farm here at Opula for 3.5 years, I believe, and we've had some bumps. It's hard.
Yeah, it turns out not straightforward, not easy.
It's not the same. Having 15 printers is not the same as having one.
Yeah, I miss having only one.
What sweet bliss.
Super chill.
One printer. Yeah, so this episode's great. We go into what printer to get. What are you looking for when you select a printer? What does Filament look like? What does selecting Filament look like? What does maintenance look like? You're trying to run these things into the ground. They're gonna break inevitably. How do you manage that? How do you manage your settings, which is a huge thing and can cause so much gaslighting and pain in the butt? How do you manage your files? And also, the creme de la creme, what prints do you run and when? It's so hard to answer that question. And 3D print farm managers hate this one weird trick. There's one weird trick for eliminating this problem that's really stupid, but it totally works.
And we'll get into it.
But yeah, print farms are fun. They work great. Just you gotta do it a certain way.
Yeah, so let's get into it.
Let's do it.
All right, so we're trying to talk about 3D printers here.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone has a print farm, and everyone uses it differently. Mm-hmm. Not everyone actually has a print farm, being silly, but like, you talk to a bunch of different farm owners, they all have way different takes on it.
Yep.
And like, it'd be fun to spill the deets on what we've figured out about it so far.
Yeah. So actually, maybe before we get into some of these specifics, like we run a big print farm here at Opula for printing most of the plastic parts in everything we sell. So it's very core to what we do here. And we've had one since, oh gosh, I don't know, mid 2021 when we started selling 3.0. So it's been, oh my gosh, we've had a print farm for 3.5 years.
We even had a couple.
Real?
We had a couple enders on a shelf. We had like 4 enders during BYOP days.
Right. Yeah, that's true. And like you would test on my Taz 5 from like 2015 and like, you know, a myriad of other printers. But a farm is a very different thing than having like one to bust out a quick print for like some goofy thing around your house.
For sure.
So we kind of broke this down into a bunch of sections of like what printer, what filament, what maintenance, what settings, what file management, and what optimization looks like for this whole thing. Like there's a lot of different aspects of this. So we kind of just broke it down into these categories to kind of dive into things that we've learned about running a print farm to make the thing we sell for 3.5 years. And like and we've made a ton of mistakes in the process.
Yeah, there's
messing stuff up.
thousands of dollars of waste.
Yeah. Which is heartbreaking,
yeah.
but also
low tens. It's like, it's been expensive to figure out how to do this right.
It really has been. It's a weird thing that like not a lot of people do this. And it's a really easy way to gradually scale into selling a hardware product and not needing to spend all this money on an injection molding die that really locks you into a design. And it's a lot of upfront capital. You can spend under $1,000 and get a couple really good printers. And that's a great stopgap. So
buying one more printer is such an easier pill to swallow than like switching to tooling on something you're still like dipping your toes into the water of selling.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good way to say it. Like it scales very linearly. Like it's a very gradual incremental steps of growth, and injection molding is 0 to everything.
Yeah.
It's like 0 to AirPods scale, like is injection molding. You don't have to be that big of a scale, but you have the ability to do that.
At least on volume. We have to shake this notion that injection molding is expensive, and because it really can depend on what you're doing.
That's
if
true.
It's a 2-part aluminum mold, like you might pay a shop $400 to cut that.
Yeah.
And like many of our prints could be switched to that. And we explore it every now and then.
Yeah. Yeah. But, we will do a couple at some point soon.
Yeah. At least for the exercise to know what it's like and to be familiar with it.
Right.
But like, if you like printing, that's awesome. And it works well for us and many others.
Yep. It gives you a lot of flexibility. If we, we release different versions of the machine all the time. If we cut a new release, we can start making it tomorrow. And that's really nice. So yeah. So let's get into some of these categories.
Yeah. So the first one on the list is printer.
Yes.
And for us, like, we've been around the block here.
we have tried a few.
This might be the more opinionated section in a way you wouldn't expect.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, definitely.
Early on, people kept telling us like, oh, you build this printer, build this open source printer design. And we didn't want it to be a project.
Yeah.
Like it didn't make sense for us to build 20 Voron 2.4s.
Yeah. Even though they might be incredibly fast and really cool, we didn't want to invest the time in getting them up and running and tweaking and tuning. And like a Formula One race car is not a good commuter.
Yeah, that's
like,
a great way to say it.
You know, it's like I want a chunky Volvo that's always going to start when it's -5 degrees outside and it's snowing. I want that puppy to start.
Yeah.
And like that's more important than like having the cool fancy thing you tweak and have fun with.
And like a warranty and support are awesome and very important.
Right.
Seldom do we use them, but it's just such an assurance to have like a customer support rep we can contact if there's something that's baffling us on the print farm.
Right. And there's an interesting balance here too about this because when I was at UConn, where you and I met, there was a hacker space or a maker space that was starting up in the Homer Babbage Library, which is the main library on campus.
Mm-hmm.
And I was helping the guy who was like getting it going, like figure out what to buy. And I made a list of all this stuff. I'm like, you should buy this, you should buy this. And he was like, oh, I want to buy some MakerBots. And I said, don't do that, because this was the period of time in MakerBot's life cycle where they had those like extruders that were effectively disposable.
The 5th gen smart extruder.
Exactly. Thank you. And they were just bad news bears. So I said, don't do it. And he's like, yeah, but they partner with Dell with this warranty for support. And we already have a Dell contract. I'm like, I don't care. I know that sounds good for the support and like it's a black box if they just take care of you. But if it fails all the time, who cares? Yeah. So there is a point where like that can be over indexed. And they did buy MakerBots and they were always down. Mm-hmm. And like they should have just bought a better printer. But so there's a point where that becomes too over optimized. So it's a balance. That's not the end all be all. It still has to be a good unit, but it also is still important to do that.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think they ever made 30-party options for that smart extruder. Like it was not a good enough of an idea to warrant like E3D making their own drop-in equivalent for it. So you were like the vendor lock in there is they have a gun to your head.
Yep. And that may not be the worst thing if the lock-in, if those extruders are great and you're just like, oh, the printer's down, I need to burn, $150 on a new Spark extruder or however much it was and drop it in and I'm up and running again. That may not be bad. It's a little expensive, but if you're operating a business, it's a very easily calculatable ROI for that purchase. So, but still kind of sucks to have to go to them. They kind of got you there.
Yeah.
So yeah, picking something that isn't a kit and something that like comes with a warranty and is effectively ready to go out of the box is like, at least in my opinion, prerequisite, I should say, is a prerequisite for this whole thing.
And I agree with that too, because as much as I love like hopping into a Discord channel and going to like printer debugging on my favorite Voron community server, there's many of them.
Yeah.
I don't want to have to hope someone answers me.
Yeah.
I want someone's job to be to answer me.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
When it's the thing that's making the thing that pays the bills, it just has to work. Like, or if it goes down, there has to be an easy recourse for getting it to work.
Yeah.
Like you just have to have that.
It's not to knock Voron. There's so many, you can buy replacement parts for any machine, any revision, any like community favored mod.
Yeah.
But it's just tool project. It's not going to be the answer for Opula.
Yeah. And another thing that's interesting about mods, as you said, it's like you want all your printers. I think we talk about this a little bit later as well, but worth mentioning here. You want all your printers to effectively be the same.
Yeah.
So if you like have a mod on one, let's say we have a farm of 2.4s and we have like one mod on a couple of them or whatever. I want to be able to treat them all the exact same way and assume they'll all make the same part the same way. But if one has slightly better cooling, okay, now that's another variable I have to like bifurcate by to figure out why this print isn't running well or whatever.
Yeah.
So like standardization is nice.
Right. Exactly. I completely agree.
Yeah.
Another component of it, one of our good friends, Jade, runs a really large Nerf gun shop, and she used to have 75 Enders built across many years, acquired from Facebook Marketplace, and she just lovingly restore them and modify them, and they're all a little different. And she's like, they're really good printers if you do these mods. And it's like, I don't want to have to wrench on the printer. I want it to work stock.
Yep.
I don't want to drift away from like this ecosystem the printer designer intended for me to be within.
Right. I want the warm straitjacket of default.
Yeah.
And it almost kind of reminds me of the T962A, the like really popular like reflow oven that like consistently everybody hates because it does a very bad job of circulating air, but they're like, do these 7 things and it's really good. And there's a list on Hackaday of like, these are the mods you do to the T962A. And then it's a lot better.
Yeah.
But I don't want to do that.
And modding your T962A is a much smaller pill to swallow because at your facility, you need probably one of those.
Right.
But if you have a print farm, you're signed on for like linearly expanding your capability.
Yeah.
It's a barrier to have to get more printers and then mod them all.
Yeah.
It's just annoying.
It's annoying. Yeah. We need to be able to just drop cash on a website and deploy more printing capability and not make it like, well, in a week and a half when we get all the parts in and we spend the time to spin it up. No, like it can't be that.
Yeah.
So at least in our opinion, like actually, if anyone's listening to this runs like a custom built thing on a farm, holy guacamole, I want to hear about it because we've, avoided that like the plague. Maybe we're crazy wrong about that. Yeah. And maybe running a Voron print farm would be like absolute bliss. I have
room to believe we're wrong as far as like belt mods and like the mods where your printer becomes angled with a fan and has a specialized build plate that releases parts when it cools down. That's not something you'll hear us talk about much. We're aware of it, but mods that make printers like auto restart and drop parts off, or you just use a belt for auto eject. Yep. Those types of mods have a lot of potential. And I think Steve and I both eagerly watch the development of these systems and modifications.
Yeah. Those are super cool. Yeah. So that's a good point. But yeah, it is interesting. So in general, something that just works out of the box, a tool and not a project, and comes with a warranty. Someone that we can call or email and be like, hey, this thing's busted. Can I spend money on getting a bunch of spare parts that we have in-house? And if a printer goes down, I can burn 5 minutes and get it up and running with that spare part that I just have inventory internally for. That needs to be the case.
Mm-hmm. And like in thinking that way, we found ourselves setting up a pretty large Prusa mini print farm.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, we started with a bunch of Prusa minis because we got a couple and we loved them. And we used those for, maybe about a year and a half, 2 years or something. And they're great.
Yeah, the premise of them seemed awesome. Like we were just printing PLA and we didn't need an enclosure. We didn't have concerns about like air draft or like warpage because again, it's just PLA. Yeah, real simple.
Exactly.
We didn't need a big build volume because the Lumen's designed to print on a machine as small as a Prusa Mini.
We literally designed it around the Prusa Mini's build volume. Yeah,
the Mini seemed like a great idea, and for a good long while it was. But honestly, we were really mean to them.
We're not nice to.
We're not nice to printers. Something I didn't expect is that it's really hard to make time for maintenance. And we learned this lesson the hard way of if you don't maintain the printers, if you don't make time for it, it makes the time for you.
Yeah, it's super true.
The cross-industry sentiment for anything. Your car, your printer, your computer, your body.
Like, no kidding.
If you don't maintain it, it'll decide when you do that.
Right.
And I don't want to bash Prusa too hard, but for us, it just... They didn't seem to like the filament we were using. They didn't seem to like to make the parts we wanted as fast as we were trying to make them run. We
tried to do some things to mitigate this. Like we switched the nozzles to 0.6 millimeter so that they were faster and we could print bigger parts. The parts came out kind of blobby and like they worked great. In fact, they were stronger with a bigger extrusion, but we had customers say that the prints didn't look good.
Yeah.
And like, although that doesn't like pragmatically matter, it mattered to the customer's aesthetics. And like, we needed to do that in order to keep up without just buying a million minis. So it just kind of didn't super pan out really well that way. And we had problems with the filament runout sensor would fail and it would print into air all the time. And we lost so many overnight or weekend prints to that.
Something too, the filament runout sensor would fail. And it would fail in combination with the Bowden tube wearing out and the filament bursting out of the Bowden tube like
a scene out of Aliens.
Yeah. So you'd come out to like a print you'd think is done, and because it didn't detect the right thing was happening. It was there's just a spool on the floor, disheveled.
Yeah, and spaghetti that had not yet been extruded. It was pre-extruder spaghetti.
Yeah.
It was very funny.
It was very sad.
So, and this was also years ago now. So like, ideally, they've fixed all these things. We haven't used recent minis in a while, but at least at the time where we got these were things that kept us from, and we know, heck, even when we had a couple of them we just used for prototyping and stuff, they were great. Like, I truly think the reason that they weren't great for us is that, like you said, we treated them poorly. We had put them in a really intense environment and did not set time aside for these kinds of things. But like, Thea has a mini that she loves and she uses it for everything. And it's great. So like, you're looking for a different set of things when you're getting a printer for a farm.
Yeah. In a commercial setting, not everyone's going to be super experienced with the printers.
True. Yeah.
So if the printer is delicate, or you need to be careful with it, or even just you need to be loving to it.
Yeah.
A farm's not a place to love your printer. It's a rough commercial environment where the printers are ran aiming for 24/7 uptime.
Yeah. As close as we can get to.
Yeah. Falling short of that is a frustrating feeling.
Yep.
So like these printers just need to run.
Yep. I think if we had to pick two of the most important aspects when you're picking a printer is speed and uptime.
Yeah.
Because speed is important, but I would much rather have a slow printer always run than two fast printers that are intermittent. Like it's always better to just like they have to be up. They can't go down. And when they do run, you do want to optimize for speed. So you need fewer printers, less like space, less electricity to print the parts that you need.
Yeah. Steve and I actually debated this till we were blue in the face, but it was, do we get more small printers or less big printers?
Right.
The versatility of having an army of tiny little printers is great.
Yeah.
But to me, the problem was like, it's hard to create a print job that could get through the night and to keep that uptime numbers high.
Right. And what's kind of funny is we ended up doing both. We have a lot of big printers now. And that turns out is the best solution.
Yeah.
But so, yeah, that's a weird aspect of it too. I think especially with the price of a lot of big volume printers now, you might as well just get a big one, especially if you, like you said, if you can't get a print that runs 12 hours, then you're wasting those hours of the printer. And like, ultimately, maybe that doesn't matter that much. But like, if you really wish, oh man, I wish I were in at the office or at the farm to flip prints at 1 a.m., a bigger volume might help alleviate that a little bit. So that's the thing to think about too.
Yeah, it's just tough because you end up feeling like for us, we feel like we're wasting so much Z-axis. Like,
yeah,
we have printers now that I don't think the printers have ever printed in like 2/3 of their Z lead.
Right. We've fully worn in the first third of the Z lead screw and the last 2/3 have never been touched.
Yeah.
From when they arrived shipping, like they go up the last 2/3 and that's the only time.
Had we built 2.4s, they would have looked weird. They would have
been squat.
Yeah, I would have made them really teeny tiny Z-axes.
This is why we need to print Lumen parts on the Lumen, because the Lumen is just like a flat, squat, wide printer.
Yeah, the Lumen would be almost perfect.
It kind of would be perfect to just print all these, because there aren't a lot of prints on the Lumen that are tall. There's some, like the legs. Yeah. The aux legs are tall, but nothing like even the other legs print on the side.
Nothing over 120 millimeter.
Yeah. So like, this is another thing to think about. And now I think it can be worth it to spend a little more money on a printer. And there also is no printer that is wide and squat. So this is kind of a moot point, but like you also want to, a really annoying thing is to be limited by the volume of your printer.
Yeah.
So if you pick a printer, and you should pick a printer, it should do everything you need it to do, but you need to pick one. And part of the reason why we picked the Mini at first was like, we print in PLA, we don't need an enclosure. Like it worked fine for us, and they were small, so we could pack a lot of them into a shelf, and they were open source. And we're Opula, we like doing open source things. And that was great. Yeah. And it was cool that we picked that.
It felt like a no-brainer. It's like the open source hardware company buys open source printers.
Exactly. Yeah. Ultimately, when they weren't working for us, it was like, okay, we need to pick a printer that is going to print the parts for us very reliably.
Yeah, that's tantamount.
That's what we need.
First and foremost.
And one of our guys, Bryce, was like, have you guys seen the P1P or whatever? And we kind of didn't entertain it really for like a couple months.
Yeah, I didn't believe it could do what people were saying.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we got one and we watched it print, and we all kind of like, we had a moment about it. It's really crazy. Yeah. And it's a weird thing. 'Cause like, we talked about this on previous episodes where like every like quarter we like to switch to a new open source thing, you know, and like we switched away from Discord for internal company communication to Mattermost, and we got a Mattermost server set up, and like, it's cool to do that. And we like supporting that kind of thing. We need the tool that works the best.
Yeah.
And Nextcloud is like an open source Google Drive, effectively like Google Docs, Google Sheets, whatever. But Google Drive is great. Yeah. And like, do we want this to be a tool or do we want it to be a project? And so we ended up pulling the trigger on a bunch of P1Ps, and they've been great. Mm-hmm. They've been really, really good. And I wish there were more open source printers that existed right now that are excellent. There's a lot of kits, but like we talked about, kits not really what we're looking for what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, we don't have enough time to build kits.
Exactly. So I don't know. And with the Prusa Core 1, I was excited maybe that would be good, but that's closed. So like, it's just, it's tough. Like, we need the thing that's the best. We just needed a printer that's just going to be a workhorse for us. So,
if there were two equivalent printers of equal capability, one was open and more expensive and one was closed and a little cheaper, we'd probably go with the more open route because there's a lot of incentives. It's more fixable. It's more adaptable. Steven could probably write cool code for it that we couldn't have otherwise, but it's just where the industry's at right now. The Bamboo Labs P1P has been our workhorse, and we have a dozen of them.
Yeah, we have a little more than that, right? We have, how many? 14?
Yeah, we have 10 on the farm right now, plus an A1, and we have 4 more on the way.
Yeah, they're really good. So I don't know. It feels weird a little bit because, like, I don't know. I want to pick the open thing if we can, but like Bruce doesn't have open printers anymore.
Yeah,
there aren't a lot of pre-built ones like that. So I don't know if we're missing one, let us know. Cause like I want to entertain it. Lulzbot is a good example. And like, we really should entertain. We should get one of their new Sidewinder things from a couple years ago.
Yeah. They look really solid.
They look cool. Yeah. Yeah. We could probably explore that, but these are all parts of picking your printer. What's going to be the thing that solves the problem for you the best? And also probably another important note about the P1P, we didn't get the P1S. We didn't get the X1 Carbon, which are like the fancier ones and they're enclosed. The P1P is literally just like a bent steel, like sheet metal frame, powder coated in the printing hardware.
Yeah.
Like it's not pretty. It's just like, it looks unfinished.
It's like you bought a Volkswagen Jetta without the doors.
Yeah.
And like the P1P is like, the P1S is like, I have doors. And we're like, nah, we don't need that.
Yeah, exactly.
We just use PLA. We don't need enclosure.
And it doesn't have to look pretty.
Yeah. If you're doing ASA, ABS, exotic materials, noxious materials, yeah, get the glass walled printer that's prettier. If you care a lot about uptime and a pretty UI, like the X1 is pretty cool. But like, just get the most Spartan printer that works for you. Whether that's a Prusa, whether it's an Ender, whether it's a P1P, it's about the tool that works.
Exactly. Yeah.
That won't make you pull your hair out.
Exactly. Like it'd be really cool if I used a framework computer all the time, but my MacBook Pro lets me do my job the best. It's the best tool right now. And I think framework will get there one day. Like seeing recently, they're doing some cool stuff. It's cool hardware they're working on, but my Mac is the thing that lets me do my job the best. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to move the needle on picking places. So it's such a weird thing. This really makes me want to get a Taz and try that out.
I'm sure that'd be great.
Cool.
And like, we are representatives of open source hardware here, but we won't let that get in the way of making the open hardware we want to put in the world.
Yep, exactly. So a lot of things to consider when picking a printer. So
that's our thoughts on printers. The other side of the coin is filament.
Yep.
It doesn't matter how good your printer is if your filament is bad.
Yes. So going into us starting a print farm, I have a bit of a confession.
Yeah.
I kind of thought everyone that was like, this filament's good, this filament's bad, was wrong. I thought they were inventing problems. I thought it was all placebo effect with they didn't slice their stuff right. And I was like, all filament is the same.
Yeah.
I was so convinced. I was just like, it doesn't matter. I'm going to get the cheapest spool possible. And I pulled my hair out with bad filament. And I was like, but when people say, oh, it's bad filament, I was like, nah, it's just weird settings with your printer.
Skill issue.
Yeah, kind of. But like, I was just super wrong about this. I was so wrong about this. Yeah, filament actually matters a lot. Like what company, how consistent is their process? Like a lot of it matters.
Oh yeah. We've had to learn a lot more than I ever cared to about filament. Allegedly, there's only 3 like extrusion machines manufacturers in the world for filament, and like so it's like do you have A machine, B machine, or C machine? But there's also what parameters are you using it? Like how do you use it? How skilled is your labor running that extrusion machine? So like even if there's only 2 manufacturers of filament resin used in filament production in 3 machines, like there's still enough permutation that brand can matter heavily. Like was the material sea shipped in a humid container?
Yep.
Getting to your country? Yep. Was it made locally by a high school dropout? Like, was it made locally and it's like really good? It's a huge spread. Yeah.
It matters a lot. And even what ratio of resin to colorant to like additives or whatever. I don't know enough to speak intelligently about it, but like there's a lot that goes into making it really good. And also there's a lot of weird verbiage about it. Like there's PLA and then there's PLA Pro. And what does that mean? That's just that's like when you say something's organic. It's like that definition is actually super wiggly and there isn't like a hard coded definition for this. So it's all kind of like, just show me the print and let's test it. And then that's the real answer.
Yeah, it's really frustrating that because I haven't seen any industry standards on what those words mean. Like PLA plus is a nothing word to me. I don't care about it.
Yeah. Same.
Sometimes they make it out to be more temperature resistant or warp resistant. PLA Pro, sometimes brands will show a data sheet that says it's more robust to higher temperatures or shock. But sometimes it's just a marketing word and you need to be really careful.
Yeah. It's weird. And so what we say, we have a phrase here that we say all the time, which is perfect, then fast. Don't try and do it quickly. First, make it really excellent, and here the adaptation is probably perfect, then cheap.
Yes.
Because you can get a $14 a kilogram spool and it's not good.
You can get an $8 spool and it might be great until the next batch shows up.
Exactly. Yeah. Like it's really not worth trying to penny pinch on filament is kind of what we settled on. Like you can get it cheaper than you might on Amazon or direct from a manufacturer if you're buying in bulk and stuff, by a few bucks a kilogram probably. But those prices are like fake. They're cutting a corner, or the really, really low ones, like the $8 kilogram. Those prices are because they're totally cutting a corner somewhere that's really going to bite you in the butt later.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
You might have a vendor that makes you feel different, and that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. But in our experience, it greatly varies. Like, I think when we were first starting out, we printed in there was some company on Amazon that sold filament that was awesome. It was really, really good filament, and we liked their colors, and we used it a bunch for stuff, and we were in love with it. And then we found out right before we were going to start up the farm that they were going out of business.
Yeah.
So we bought a ton of their filament just so we could have it.
Yeah.
And we popped around between a handful of different filament manufacturers, and some were great and some were not. And it's just, you got to try a bunch of stuff. Like, it doesn't matter until you run some prints and you see how well it prints.
I end up feeling like you pay for cheap filament in different ways.
Yeah.
Like we had this bottom shelf material and it was just eviscerating our Bowden tubes.
Yeah.
Like we were saying earlier, the filament would burst out of it.
Yeah.
Our nozzles would clog. The printers would go down, costing us maybe $100 a week in labor for printer maintenance that we didn't otherwise need.
Yep.
It was just not fun. And when we're trying to make pick and place machines, our job shouldn't be fixing printers.
Yeah.
And dealing with the consequences of cheap material.
Right. Yeah. It's a way better investment to spend a little more per part or for the plastic, and it saves us time to really just focus on the thing we're trying to solve.
Yeah.
Totally worth the investment for that. So yeah, that was a tricky thing to fix. And we're still kind of threading it a little bit. Like, things have been way, way, way better. We've switched companies a couple times, and stuff's good now, and we're trying some other stuff, and it's a big messy thing.
It's important to have strong relationships to the filament vendor if you're in a high enough volume to constitute it. For us, I won't buy filament unless we can call them.
Yeah.
And talk to an account rep or an engineer on the floor.
Yep.
Just because still a kind of new industry, and this stuff can vary batch to batch.
Yeah. Yeah, it really can. It's also it might, even if you're spending more money per kilogram, it might literally still save you money, because if you have a bunch of failed prints that or problems with your printer because stuff gets clogged or broken or whatever, that will cost you more than the difference in price. Uptime and reliability is the cheapest thing ever.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah.
If a printer is reliable enough with good material to go for 14 hours without intervention, that's incredible. If your filament works well enough that you can have long prints that get your printers through the night confidently, that's great. You can't come in the morning and have half your printers jammed and not have the parts you need to build that day.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. It's super important.
Yeah.
Another little random nugget about filament is we will also buy in 5 kilogram spools.
Oh yeah.
So we have to load it 1/5 as much, which is great because we drink filament. So getting really big spools helps a lot.
That's a massive optimization for us.
Yeah.
5 p.m. comes around, you don't want to be swapping out spools just to have enough material on the loaded to get through the night.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You want to make sure it's going to sail for 12 hours if need be, and it's not going to run out.
Yeah. And we've been lucky too. We don't need dry boxes.
Yeah.
Certain brands of PLA are more moisture sensitive. And we've been lucky to avoid that. But if you print fast enough, you go through your material quickly, the material won't degrade before it's left your facility.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, it's a weird thing. There's some things that people are like the humidity thing has never affected me, but here I am saying, oh, no filament brand doesn't matter. And like, I was super wrong about that. Yeah. So who knows, foot and mouth, but it hasn't affected us at all really for the humidity. And in general, we don't have it out of the like humid sealed bag long enough for moisture to affect it. Like we crack it open, that spool gets drank and it's printed very quickly and then it's in the part and Bob's your uncle. Like there's no time for it doesn't sit, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's why we don't see it, but
a lot of factors. Yeah.
So that's filament. I think start off not worrying so much about cheap filament, get really good stuff. And then if you're like, as a cost down measure, let's validate this other brand and then run all your tests, do all your stuff that you need to with that, build one of your units with the different stuff, see if it still works, run a bunch of prints, make sure it's going to not get jammed or whatever, and then switch over. But like start good and work your way down. Don't do the other way around.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I had one more tidbit before we move on. Disregard silk filament.
Super underrated message here. Yeah, silk filament is like terrifying.
Yeah, that is a siren's trap. Ignore it.
Yeah, the layer lines on a silk filament is as well connected as the pages in a book are. Yeah. Like looking at the edge of a book is the same thing as looking at a silk print. It's like you just kind of flick it a little bit, they all come apart.
You breathe on it the wrong way.
You breathe and it shatters into the layers.
Yeah.
Silk, I will, anything that says silk, anything that looks shiny, no, not interested.
Yeah. And if anyone listening feels differently, I'm happy for you.
Yeah.
We've had horrible luck with silks. And
Super
like
bad.
we've been shopping around looking for like the perfect gold filament to represent Opula's gold color. And like silks hit often and we've tried them and it's just
nothing.
Bad news.
If you have a good silk, please let us know in Discord or email podcast@opula.io because I will buy it and I will test it. If you have a good, strong silk, layers do not come apart, good layer adhesion, I want to hear about it.
Yeah, but it's just been a nightmare.
Yeah, it's been a real nightmare. That's a really good point. No silk.
Yeah, disregard it.
Yeah.
Any other filaments like that worth mentioning? Like,
I mean, we don't do, like, you can get carbon fill added, and like the Lumen does not require that kind of additive. It's something to think about if you're doing like really high strength stuff. Like Lucian, you talk all the time about how like Nerf guns are or blasters. Nerf blasters are like one of the like most intense applications for like consumer grade 3D printing that you'll really see. Like there's crazy pressures and forces and huge high pressure springs in some of these blasters. They're crazy. And so if you're doing something like that or really intense application, maybe you want to go carbon fiber, you have nylon, weird other materials. We stick with pretty plain Jane stuff and it works great for us. So I don't think we have much to say in the scope of running that kind of stuff on a farm because we just haven't had to very much, you know?
We've been lucky and designed around the filament we use.
I think there's literally one part in the Lumen that uses PET G. Everything else is PLA. It's great.
Yeah. This is as much as I could say about filament.
Yeah, I think so. All right, so third thing is maintenance. So your printers will go down. If you're treating them very poorly, like you probably would and maybe should, they're going to die at some point. And, you know, you could do preventative maintenance. So far, we haven't really done that very much. Sometimes we will. If I'm looking at a printer, I'm like, oh, this looks a little dirty or whatever. I'll clean a bearing or something like that. But for the most part, if a printer goes down, we'll service it at that point.
Yeah.
We could probably do it. We could probably be more proactive about that.
It's been nice that the P1Ps and the A1 from Bamboo will tell you if it thinks the belt is loose or if a linear like lead screw, if a lead screw needs like lubrication.
Oh yeah, I have seen that on the P1.
And like it can even tell if the extrusion seems like awry.
Really?
Pretty handy. And I think printers, these upcoming generations are getting a little bit better at maintenance tracking and like alerting you that preventative maintenance is needed.
Sure.
But like some of the older stuff we were playing with earlier on, like the minis and the enders, like none of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You could tell when they were broken.
Yeah.
What's insidious is if a printer is doing something that affects print integrity, rarely.
Yeah, that sucks. Or especially when you can't tell visually.
Yeah, that like a thermistor is underreporting the temperature and your parts are not being printed right, or an extruder like gear is clogged and it causes a layer to have a little bit of missing material and it creates a fault line that delams. Those are the scary ones to track.
Yeah, those are horrible.
in like aerospace, when where additive is used, they will print tensile bars and other types of material science evaluation parts and like make sure they're still strong regularly.
Yeah.
That doesn't matter as much for us because parts would usually break during assembly if they're going to.
Yeah.
But yeah, be aware of like secret failures.
Secret failures. Yeah. They're hard to find. They're really hard to find. But if you have a good QC process on finding them, they will become self-evident pretty quickly. There are very few that aren't completely hard, like impossible to detect. Like you'll be able to tell. You just have to know to look for it.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And like ultimately a printer just needs to be easy to repair. This isn't really about it being open or closed.
Yeah.
If you can buy parts for it and you think you can buy parts for it into the future, then that's usually enough for us, especially if the docs for maintenance and like repair are there.
Are good. Yeah. Yeah. And this is interesting because like, you know, open source is really great for like making something easy to repair if you're like not connected to if the company goes under.
Yeah.
Because you have full access to the entire source. You can hack it, you can buy your own parts, you can design your own parts, but that doesn't mean it's actually easy to keep it running all the time. Like when the minis would like the extruder would clog and the extruder gear would grind through the filament, it would get all this filament powder all inside this little subassembly, and it was so hard to clean it out. It took so long, and it was such a pain in the butt. But what's nice about the P1Ps is that there's like 3 bolts that hold in the entire extruder assembly. You take it out, you swap in a new one, and it's like a whole new printer.
Yeah.
And like the design files don't exist for that, but we can spend $15, buy a replacement part, and our downtime is 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So like these two things are related, but not exactly the same. You know, closed open source repairability, you know, that's more of a design choice than anything else.
Yeah. I'm really excited though to see more open source printer designers try to like steal these ideas.
Yeah.
Like the A1's nozzle comes out and the heater block is built into like the nozzle mount.
Yeah.
You don't have to unclip the heater from the nozzle as you remove it. You don't have to unthread the thermistor like nut.
Yeah.
It's just, you just move this piece of metal and you pop in a new one.
Yeah. It's actually kind of crazy. There's like a clamp that holds a block of metal and that's your nozzle. It's really wild.
Yeah. I can't wait for the rep world to adopt some of those ideas.
Yeah. They're really cool. And that makes it very easy to swap that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a really interesting part about it. When we have a printer that goes down, like I'd say maybe every 3 or 4 weeks, you and our buddy Wilkes will just like burn an evening doing a bunch of printer repairs.
Yeah.
And like just swapping out hot ends, swapping out extruder subassemblies and just getting the farm back up. And it's great.
About every month we have to fix 4 printers.
Yeah. Which is, I mean, we have thousands of hours on them. We've run these P1Ps for like, oh gosh, I don't know, probably a year and a half before we started getting failures. And now occasionally something will crop up and we'll replace them as need be. But like for the first few years, there was like nothing.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. These printers are not designed to be on a production line. It's a consumer product and we're treating it like a piece of industrial equipment. Yeah. So like the fact that they will put up with this and do it this well is like kind of astounding. Really.
Yeah. And I don't want the P1Ps to escape this podcast episode with like perfect marks. Like
that's fair.
They sometimes have weird errata and electrical gremlins and like they have to be restarted constantly. And like sometimes they're hard to fix and the printer gets mothballed by us for months on end. But
that's true.
It's still over the aggregate. It's been a more reliable time than other machines we've used.
That's true. Yeah. We had a problem for a while where like we would try and run a print and the printer was just like, no, you don't. And it just wouldn't run the print.
Yeah.
And like, there was stuff like that where it just seems kind of buggy there.
Yeah, or we've had firmware updates that just screwed the Z offsets on every G code file we had, and it constituted spending like 4 hours reslicing a bunch of jobs.
Yeah. I think a lot of these things show their teeth because we've been so mean to them. It's not like it's a perfect set it and forget it. Like I don't think that exists for a farm printer.
No,
they go down.
Not.
Injection molding machines go down. If you're being really rude to a piece of hardware, it's going to be rude back at some point. Yeah. You know, like that's just how it has to be.
It's just entropy. It's a big moving machine that's doing a lot of things. There's a lot of sensors. It's going to, I just expect failure.
Yeah.
And just be able to react to it. Like, our extruder assemblies are quick. They take 5 to 10 minutes. It's not traumatic.
It's not a failure to plan for printer downtime. Like just don't expect it. You need to be aware of the fact it's going to go down and have a plan to fix it. And like we have a bunch of those replacement parts in stock right now in the other room. So if a printer goes down today, we can get it running a print tonight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, anytime we buy more printers, we probably buy a couple $100 of replacement parts just for the rest of the farm.
Right. Yep.
Because it's negligent to not have that on hand. If you're caught with your pants down because you don't have more nozzles, like that's just, you're a bad farm owner. You're a bad farmer.
You're not farming good.
Yeah. I don't know. Plan for maintenance.
Plan for maintenance. It's going to be part of it. And like, just accept that. Accept it. We also keep maintenance logs. You made all these sheets where we log every time we do maintenance. Who did it? What was replaced? What's the number of print hours on that unit? Like, so we can just keep track of like, wow, every 50 hours on this printer, the same part breaks. That's really often. Maybe there's something else going on.
Yeah. As we often say, we have tiny little meat computers, and like, I cannot remember how often I'm unclogging printer 2.
You shouldn't. That's a waste of your brain.
Yeah. So if I go to service printer 2 and I see, wow, every 50 hours it needs its nozzle replaced, I'm going to open that extruder
and see what the heck's going on.
Weird in there.
Right. Yeah.
And like that makes great documentation in case you need to do a warranty claim or a RMA.
That's true. Yeah.
Because there's just there must be something wrong with it.
Yeah.
Keeping good docs on maintenance is really important. And the more like ISO controlled a facility you're in, like the more expected and required it is. So it's good practice.
It is. It's very good practice to do it. And it wasn't that much work to set it up. You made a template, copied it a bunch of times for all our printers, and we just do every time we do maintenance, we just crack the sheet open and write down what we did. It's like, it's not hard to maintain. It's really not a lot of extra structure.
Yeah. It's great. I would recommend it.
Yep. Next is settings.
Right.
Slicer settings is really what we mean.
Yeah.
Here.
So slicer settings. As you may expect, we like to keep it stock. We'll bump up speeds a little bit, but we're trying to keep our settings constant. We'll have like a high detail setting and then like a basic setting.
Yeah.
And that's about it.
Yeah.
Very rarely we'll need to move a part from like Bamboo Studio to Orca Slicer.
Yeah. Well, I think we use Orca for like a couple weird things occasionally, but for the most part, we want to stay in the ecosystem.
Yeah, there's been parts that just don't slice right in Bamboo Studio, and like they're fine in Orca. And I couldn't tell you why, but it's not worth leaving the ecosystem and doing them all on that.
Yeah.
Because what's the support rep at Bamboo going to say to you if you're having troubles with Orca?
Use our slicer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just skip that.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's definitely better.
Or it seems so far at least.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think it's the same thing as with everything else in that it's perfect then fast.
Oh, completely.
I'd much prefer to have like 60% fewer parts per hour, but they succeed every time rather than, the full potential peak of parts per hour, but it has like a 40% chance of failing. I don't care if it's slow at first. Like I just want it to be reliable. And so if you do crazy fast settings, if you do like crazy wacky stuff like that, it's going to greatly increase your chances you're going to have a failure.
Yeah. Yeah, we used to pack the build plates with like a lumen worth of parts.
Yeah, it was like kind of wacky.
And ended up feeling inadvisable.
Yep. Because if you have like, I don't know, if you have like a million tiny little parts on like a, 17-hour print and one pops off the bed, your whole print is nuked. And like, yeah, it's nice to have a 16-hour print, 17-hour print where you don't have to, flip it very often. But if something goes wrong, it's like, how often do you want a quick save in a video game?
Yeah.
How far are we through this week's production of parts? Like, I want a quick save pretty often if it's a system that might fail. I'm gonna be quick saving every chance I get.
Yeah, we're definitely a little apart here. Like, I try to make the printer jobs last at least like 5 to 8 hours.
Yeah,
because you also don't want to be at the farm every hour, every half hour.
Yeah,
so it's a balance.
It is a balance. Yeah.
We don't print the parts one at a time. We don't quick save every step in the video game.
Exactly. Yeah. I still need to like every hit on the boss. I'm not going to freaking save, right? Like
depends on the boss.
Yeah. It's in my mind, that's like we print 2 control boxes in one print. Wowza.
Yeah.
Maybe 1. But like, and I think I totally agree with you. We definitely do differ on this because I think I am more conservative in like how aggressive I will push a print and you'll let it run. And if it fails a little bit more frequently, maybe you'll just let that go. And I think it's healthy where we land in the middle. But, this is going to depend on your risk tolerance. How reliable is your printer? These things matter a lot.
Mm-hmm. No, I completely agree.
Yep.
And even like the cooling of your printer. Mm-hmm. Like you want to make sure we've had parts where like if they print in the outer corner of the bed, they don't work well. So right. You're only going to have like a circular fill of parts in the center of the build plate.
Or they're like in the back left corner where like the aux fan is. Like
yeah.
when we print worm gears for feeders, There's like, it looks like a bunch of little dudes huddling by a fire. like they're all kind of like packed into this corner. It's like, what are you doing back there, guys? They're by the fan and they print way better there. And I ran so many little test prints of like, if I do one extra layer, they start to look bad.
Yeah.
So it's the max area in that back left corner where there's really excellent cooling where we can print that part. So yeah.
Another thing to consider is like brim and support. Sometimes they're worth having. But you don't want to be removing brims off of every single part you print.
Yeah.
So like it is a safety measure you can implement probably where needed. It's something I add to parts after repeated failure and delam.
Yeah. Yeah. If don't keep bashing your head against a wall like, oh, it's not printing, let me try it again. But like, just put a brim. Like you can remove a brim, but it's really nice to not have a brim if at all possible.
And similarly, there's parts on the Lumen that are designed to not need support. We print them with support because it makes them just a little bit more pleasant to deal with at the farm.
Yeah. And
not the end of the world.
And the default settings nowadays in 2024 for support removal is insane. Yeah. Like you flick it and the filament you flick it and the support drops away. Like it's nothing. So now is a really good time to be dealing with support removal and brim removal. It's not bad. It's like not the end of the world to do it.
Yeah, it's fun to eliminate it where possible in designs, but like it's not, support-free designs are not a North Star to me anymore just because it's so good now. Yeah,
it's not the end of the world.
Another kicker to consider here is that when you're doing part design, when you're doing R&D for new parts in a machine or a product, whatever you're selling, do the production settings. Maybe even print the production build plate, like job. Like the full 3MF layout you had in mind. Is a part might be different in your hand if you printed it one at a time or like 10 at a time.
Yeah, we've actually seen that a lot where printing one alone is like super chill, but you pack 15 on a plate and they're just busted.
Yeah.
It stinks. It's like very annoying actually.
Because if let's say you have a part with a bunch of overhang and if it cools down while you go to print the other 9 on the bed, it's going to bridge different.
Yep. Yeah. And that hasn't yet been fully calculated for in slicers yet. So like there's still some stuff. It's not a perfect tool yet, but it's like getting there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Slicers are incredible tools. Yeah. They're really something else.
It's also really important to standardize your settings. So like sometimes I'll do the slicing for a build. Sometimes, most of the time you do it, but sometimes I'll do slicing for getting stuff onto the farm. And like we have all of our settings connect through Bamboo Studio, but like regardless of what slicer you use, make sure that you have a Google Drive shared folder and everyone uses the same settings. Like keep it standardized, have an SOP for what slicing looks like. Cause if different people are doing it, there's so many little checkboxes and settings that you can do there. Make sure it's very well written down and standardized across your team. So, cause if I had a nickel for every time we're like, why is this feeder frame not printing well? It's like, oh, well, it was sliced with some random profile.
Yeah.
I'd have a lot of nickels. Like I avoid that if you can.
Yeah. This is an area where it's worth being superstitious. Like,
yeah,
if you're keeping variables constant and one's sliced on Windows and one's on Mac, like I don't even trust that it's the same G code. I haven't looked. I don't trust it. Like superstition here is handy. If like we used to try having just a slicer computer.
Yeah.
And that was a little bit heavy-handed.
Yeah.
We walked that back, and now we just have all of our settings synchronized and across our Bamboo Labs account. Yeah. That's been great.
Yeah, that has been really good. I mean, we're even hesitant to change, like, our printers have been asking us for a firmware update for like 8 months, and we won't do it because we know how they work at this firmware update.
Mm-hmm.
We've had firmware updates with these printers in the past where it made things worse. I think you mentioned it before. We had to reslice everything because the Z offset was weirdly off and nothing would stick to the bed or whatever. And like we had to slice it. The version of Bamboo Studio we sliced it with wasn't compatible with the firmware. Stupid thing like that. Just pick one.
Yeah.
And as long as it's not that annoying, don't update it unless you're like planning on doing a full revalidation of the whole software pipeline.
Yeah. It's something you see across the board manufacturing. It's like updates aren't really favored or enjoyed if you have a stable process. Chill on it.
Yeah. Right. If you're playing around with, there's this new feature, I want to play with scarf seams. You bet my personal install of Orca Slicer is popping off with the latest version. You bet.
Yeah.
But Bamboo Studio is like a year old.
Yeah. We had someone on the line that wanted to hyper optimize every part and like finesse a setting per build. And it's just like, no, this is where we are boring.
Yeah. This is not the place to innovate. Someone smarter than us that spent more time working on slicer settings already picked the best set of settings.
Yeah.
Let's just trust them and do little tweaks based on what we know we need.
The other component of it too there is we want to make sure these parts that we use in the machine are printable by someone with default settings. If it requires these like crazy tunings to get this part to work right, that's not really fair. I don't want to make geometry changes to the Lumen based off of like the expectation you have these crazy settings in this arcane printer. Like it needs to be friendly and like stock.
You should be able to make a Lumen on an Ender 3.
Yeah.
When you're pushing the limit of how much a printer needs to be able to produce, maybe we'll tweak stuff, but like the part needs to be able to be pretty bone stock printable.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good point.
And I suspect that's true for most open hardware ventures and projects.
Mm-hmm. Yep, totally.
So it's a little bit on settings. Just be chill about it.
Stick to stock. Don't get cheeky. Make sure everyone's using the same stuff.
Yeah.
And once you get something that works, don't you dare update.
Yeah.
Do not update it.
And this is a great segue into file management.
Yes. Yep.
You want to take it?
Yeah, sure. So file management is another tricky thing about this. And there's been a few instances of different companies trying to tackle how this works. So every printer since the beginning of time has had the ability to drop an SD card or a flash drive into the printer and have it run G-code you sliced and just moved over. It's sneakernet. And that's fine. But when you're trying to update 10 printers, it makes you want to pull your hair out. It's miserable.
It's pretty rough.
It's pretty rough. It's a great emergency backup, but like we're not happy about it. It stinks.
Yeah.
So that's a thing. Like I remember Bryce sitting at his computer, like with like the craziest, wackiest, like octopus looking USB hub
like
thing.
Multiple hubs daisy chained together.
Exactly. And he's flashing like hundreds of G-code files onto these flash drives. And he's just sitting there's computers like ground to a halt, copying all this stuff over. And he's just looks so sad when it's happening. It's bad. It's not, it technically works, but oh my Lord, you're not going to be happy during the process.
Imagine doing that with hundreds of printers.
Right.
It's just, you can't.
It's not feasible.
Yeah.
It's truly not. So like there's some things like Prusa has Prusa Connect, which I haven't personally messed with, but I've heard that it's like pretty excellent for managing sending files to places. And Bamboo Studio has like kind of a farm feature, but it's kind of lackluster. Like what they tried to do is if you have like a slice plate, you can be like, send to my whole farm. And it's like, cool. All the printers that I have, it's going to send the same G-code to all of them.
But you better not have more than 6 printers.
But exactly.
Yeah.
You can't have more than X number of printers, and it's going to run all of them at the same printers at the same time. And it will stagger the heat up cycle. So it doesn't take too much current from your fuse, which is pretty cool. But like, I want to be able to run this part and that part and that part and that part on all my farm at the same time.
And something I really hate about that tool is that it's reslicing and then uploading the job again to the printers. So like, what if you accidentally changed a setting or you've reopened it and you had the material for your other printer still selected?
Does it reslice it?
Yeah, I think it does.
Oh, I didn't
I'm under
notice
that impression. Yeah, because you can't just open a G-code file and send that.
Oh, sure. Yeah, you have to open the project.
Yeah.
That's fair. Yeah. Yeah, it's a bummer.
So
I think that just goes for all Bamboo Studio, though. If you open a 3MF, it doesn't save the last sliced instance. Like you have to reslice it. Yeah.
It's all to say you're better off working with the G-code files.
I see what you're saying. Yeah. There isn't yet a slicer solution, a built into the slicer solution. I've been like, yes, this does everything we need to update the farm. So I made a little Python tool that will kind of do this for us. All the P1Ps have an FTP server on them that is just open that you can access, which is really cool. And so I just wrote a little Python desktop app where you pretty much select a JSON file that tells you all the login creds for your printers. It's very easy to pull them off the UI of the printer. Also, you select which folder you want to upload all the files from and you hit go and it'll send them over. It's nice because it's automatic and it will send all the files to all the printers. So if you just want to upload this to everything, like you just hit it and then, you go to lunch and it sits there uploading for a while and then you're done. And it's not super reliable, to be totally honest. Like, I think there's a weak little ESP8266 handling the Wi-Fi in these, maybe ESP32 in these printers. It's not super robust. It'll drop out sometimes. Like, there are problems with getting that to be more robust. And I think people much smarter than me are making PRs to that project to make it better.
Yeah, you got 7 right now.
Oh boy, yeah, I gotta go check that repo. I know Ben just made one the other day.
7 PRs, a couple issues. All good stuff though.
Good. Yeah, I need to give that some attention. But that was great for us. I made a video about it too. We'll put a link in the description of the video about the tool. And that's worked out pretty well. But this is going to be something you'll have to deal with. And like, no matter what, you're going to have to solve this problem somewhere. And this tool, I think some people have made some PRs for like uploading to like Clipper and Octoprint and like a bunch of other different kinds of printers as well. So you could use this tool, but no matter what, you're going to have to find a way to like synchronize the updated version of all your files to the farm. And that's a messy problem that we're still not super happy with yet. Like this tool has helped a lot, but it's not quite yet the panacea. I want the slicer to do it. I don't want to have to write a tool to do it.
It points at, I want it to be thought of and managed by like an even higher level tool. Cause like the biggest problem to me in slicers and print farm management is like what to print and when.
Right. Yes. And this leads beautifully into our last category, which is exactly what you said, what to print and when. And I'd like to thank this episode's sponsor, PCBWay. We use PCBWay for all of our prototyping boards for everything in the Lumen PNP, including when we're trying to replace a 3D printed part with a PCB, which we do a lot in the Lumen PNP. There's a lot of weird PCBs that are replacing printed parts. Yet another thing we can remove from the farm. And when we're testing out how that goes into the system, we get our boards very quickly from PCBWay in under a week. They're excellent quality. Thank you so much to PCBWay for sponsoring this episode.
Yeah, this is the hardest part of operating a farm.
Yes.
This is more complicated than running the farm. It's more complicated than maintaining the printers. It's like, it's impossible to know you're doing it perfectly. It's like, it's an unsolved thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think one of the reasons why it's such a hard thing to figure out what to print and when is because of how many variables there are. There are so many frickin' things to try and tune. If you were to write a script to calculate the most optimal way to run prints, you have how many different kinds of printers you have on the farm. You have what filament material is it, Petchy or PLA? What color? Because we have two different colors of PLA in the Lumen that we have to like negotiate between. How long is the print? What time of day is it right now? What day of the week is it right now? You might want to run a different print Thursday night than Friday night because Friday has Saturday, Sunday to run. So that's part of it. How many parts are in your plate? How many parts do you actually need for the build?
Yeah, you don't want to make 200 of a thing you need 10 of per year.
Yes.
Just because you could.
Just because it's quick to do it. It's like, maybe you could, but then now that's extra wasted print that maybe if you uprev your design, you're going to have to throw it away. So it's such a multivariable problem. It's so difficult to try and be like, well, what do I actually run? It's very hard. And it doesn't sound like it's that hard. It's just like, well, just run what you need. And like, that's kind of what we settled on with a different system. But it's very hard to calculate this. Yeah. Is kind of what we settled on.
And there's expensive planning tools and farm management solutions, none of which I think perfectly have solved this yet.
Yeah.
So nothing worth recommending on my end here.
Yeah, same with me.
Like the dream is you see a Gantt chart where you have your printer and you have the job it needs to run and it's aware of the variables you care about and it schedules it for you.
Yep.
And maybe when the bed is marked clear, it flips it.
Yeah. I think so. So we have kind of solved this problem.
Yeah. In lieu of some fancy software tool, there are things you can do.
Yes. And we did kind of the silliest one.
Which is just buy more printers.
Which is far and away the easiest way to solve trying to optimize. If we're trying to have like, oh, we have 6 printers and technically 24-hour of printing on 6 printers is just barely enough to do. Buy more printers.
Yeah. if 6 will do it, if you're perfect with allocation and management and they never go down,
then you need 10.
Yeah, then get 10.
And this is tough because printers cost money.
Yeah.
And depending on where you are in your process of growing and how much capital you have to spend on this kind of thing, this can be a steep ask. But when a Black Friday sale, you can get 4 P1Ps for $2,000. That's pretty good. Yeah. Like it makes it a very compelling argument to just add more firepower instead of spending all this time of like, how do we barely scrape out an extra, 3 hours of production time? Just slap another printer on your farm and it makes everything breathe so much easier.
Yeah. And another way to relax is just to eliminate variables.
Yes.
Like we quickly got rid of having varying nozzle size.
Oh yeah. That was such that whole variable, another problem space completely eliminated.
Yeah. The more dimensions you can eliminate, the better. If everything prints, and this isn't true for us, but if everything prints on a textured build plate with a 0.4 nozzle in black filament on the same printer model, you have a very easy time compared to having 4 different colors, texture, smooth bed, 2 different types of printers in the farm.
Yeah, that's truly devastating.
Or a big spool and small spool. And then you need to make sure you have the right holders at the farm. It's just, you just want to make it as simple as you can while making the product or project look nice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a really good way to say it. Like, I think so. Like, printer type is one of the things. One of these variables I think we've tried to remove as much as possible is like when we're running a printer on the farm, we run that printer. Mm-hmm. Like we have an A1 because we kind of bought it just to like mess around with it, and it has a cool AMS and we use it for like one multicolor print, but it's like a very weird exception. We run P1Ps.
Yeah.
When we slice, we only have to slice for one printer. If we had to slice for an entire other set of printers, I'd want to punch myself in the face.
Yeah. If the P2P came out, like the new version, my response would be to buy 10 more P1Ps.
Yeah, honestly, it probably would be. Or what you could do is you could slice, let's say all feeder parts run on an A1, all lumen parts run on a P1P. And then that way you're still only slicing it for one printer. You just switch which printer is based on the file. So like that's another way you could try and do it. But like if at all possible, just pick a printer. Just pick it and stick with it. It makes it so much easier to standardize.
Yeah, we used to have it so that the minis hung around a little longer than we let on. Like the minis hung around as 0.6 only machines interoperating with Bamboo Lab P1Ps.
Yeah.
And we had a mix where if it's a high detail print, the P1P did it. And we had to slice each way. Yep. And then when we wanted to make everything fully P1P, we had to think like, is this leg extension the same height if I print it with a mini versus a P1P? And it was just like, the product's not designed to have that type of variation considered. Exactly. So just keeping it constant was so good for us.
Yes. Yeah. It really is nice. So as many of these that you can eliminate as possible. Another one of like number of parts in the plate. We kind of have one plate of parts and it has a number of parts. It's very rare that we will slice a part twice with a different number of parts on there. Like I think we have 2 different G-code files for the control box for the Lumen V4 that has 2 or 1.
Yeah.
And it's like, do we need a control box like now? It's almost kind of emergencies where we have a variant that's like a smaller count of these things. And we'll have that, but that's another variable. So it's nice to not have to have that if possible, but it can be handy.
Yeah. That was an interesting one where like for us at Opulo, having prints that can make it through the night based off duration are kind of coveted.
Yeah.
So like a control box job, making 2 of them can go 12 hours, but maybe we don't care to make that part be the one that we get 2 of on per printer over the night shift because we need to make a bunch of back legs.
Yes.
So it's nice to be able to just have the printers run the 1-up version of that print during the day.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a good point. At time of day, that's where time of day matters a lot.
Yeah. A similar lesson learned there was for feeder frames. During feeder launch, we were up to the neck in feeders prints, and we needed even more than that.
Yeah.
So we would print, what was it? We do 5 in the morning, and then you'd think we'd do 5 again, but we didn't have time for that because we wanted to print 2 or 3, depending on what time you noticed the print stopped.
Yep.
Depending on what time you started that morning print.
Yep.
You'd either do a 2X or a 3X.
Yep.
Leaving you with about a half hour at the end of the shift to start 5 running during the night.
Yep.
So like that's where it matters too. If you just have one file, optimizations like that are what you do.
And especially during feeder launch when we were working real crazy grubby hours, maybe we'd run a 5 print in the afternoon because we knew we were going to be here late to flip it for another 5.
Yeah.
So like so much of that kind of depends. And all of these problems go away when you have more printers than you need.
Yeah.
If you have 1,000 printers and you kick off 5 in the morning and you don't touch them again for the next 24 hours, you have 5,000 prints. That's good. And of course that's an extreme example, but like this problem truly is solved with more firepower. Mm-hmm. Until there is an excellent software solution to just dictate what the optimal configuration is based on your parameters and your preferences and all that stuff, more printer, more better. I mean, that's kind of how it boils down, which feels like a punt, but it's like the best solution for now.
Definitely the case.
Yeah.
But if you can't afford to buy infinite printers, eliminate your variables and keep it simple.
Do a combo when you can handle buying more printers. Like we just decided recently, just a couple days ago, we just bought a bunch more printers. It's like, we can definitely spend the money to get some more printers. We have the space for it. You just rearrange the print farm to make them facilitate more printers. You know, if you are able to facilitate buying more hardware, it just greases the skids for everything else. to keep up with production much easier. So that's kind of the best way to do it right now.
Yeah. To summarize on this, because I think it's really important, the way we approach it is that all printers are the same model with the same diameter nozzles to reduce the variable.
Yep.
All of the printers are dedicated to a given color or type, at least on a short-term basis.
Yep.
Short jobs are run during the day and flipped as needed to run other short jobs.
Yep.
And then like ideally 12-hour jobs are ran at night.
Yep.
Because you want to keep that printer busy. And for those overnight prints, it's handy to watch those for like a good half hour before you go home for the night, just to make sure you don't come back to spaghetti.
Right. Yeah, it's nice to do that.
And ideally, it's ready to be flipped when the shift starts.
Yep.
So you can get as much time out of it running short jobs in that workday.
Exactly. Yep.
And then like what Steven said earlier with the software, printers are loaded up with SD cards that have the same file set.
Yes.
It's like you don't want to be re-uploading the files each time you want to start a job. That's minutes of time wasted per printer per job.
Yep. Yeah. Every SD card is the exact same. It has all the same files across the board.
And that makes it so handy. That's how we've kept our sanity in this multidimensional problem.
Yes. Yeah. and we're just now shifting into that thing you mentioned of like a printer has a color or a filament loaded. Like all your printers are running and you're like, man, I really need a gold print. And your only free printer has black filament. It's really nice to not have to swap that color out. So if you kind of select, hey, these printers are for this color, these are for this one, and you have enough printers, then you never really have to swap a spool just to get a different color. Of course, you always have to when it runs out. But if you can minimize that, that's really nice too. And we're kind of shifting more towards thinking about maybe we just have a dedicated color or material per printer, and that's it.
Yeah, and it's super handy.
Yeah.
The A1 has an AMS attached to it, and it's loaded with black, gold, blue, and red. And that's a little different than what we just said, but we have a couple different colors in use. Very seldom, though. So we need multicolor or a red print or a blue print. We just let the A1 automatically switch for us, so an operator's not wasting their time changing filament out. Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, AMSs are really nice for not having to swap filament more so than doing multicolor prints. Like we don't really have a lot of time for multicolor prints. We have one in the whole machine and it's only on like the first few layers. So it adds as little amount of time as possible. But everything else is like, no, it just means you don't have to swap spool. That's really the value add for an AMS. Also, if folks aren't familiar, an AMS is a automated material system. It like facilitates putting a bunch of different color spools in, and the printer itself will puppeteer different colors in and out so you can print multicolor, just swap them automatically.
Yeah, they're super handy. And there's even some cool open source versions of it.
Yeah.
Like Prusa had the MMU. There's the crazy acronym, the Enraged Carrot Rabbit Feeder. And I think there's a new one that's like turtle themed.
Yes.
Talking about?
Yeah. I think I saw Jason from LDO just talking about it.
Yeah. So there's a bunch and they're really fun.
Yeah.
Multicolor is sick, but it adds a lot of time. So.
It does add a lot of time. Multiple extruders like the Prusa XL does multicolor without the time. Like it's way, way, way quicker to swap between colors and stuff. But you know, that's a different thing.
Oh yeah. And we try not to run printers that fancy.
Yeah.
As you could probably guess.
Right. Yeah. And the kind of like the last piece of this too is like, when do we know that we need more parts? Because there would be times where we'd be like ready to ship a lumen and we'd be like, oh, we're out of auxiliary staging plate feet. We can't tape up this box because we don't have this part. And it was devastating. Like this happened more often than it should.
Yeah, every lumen in the office lost its foot more often than I care to admit.
Yeah, there was like the dedicated lumen that like we just steal the foot off of it. and like that stinks. Like we shouldn't have to do that. And sometimes it would like really mess with our ability to ship stuff. Like it was really tricky. It got frustrating. So we switched to using a Kanban system. And you can look this up and see how all this stuff works. And I also talked about this a bunch in the YouTube video that I made about kind of our print farm, really, which is linked in the description. But effectively, when we get low on a part, there's like an indicator in all the bins that hold all our prints. When the level gets low, there's a little card that whoever took that last part that made the level go low, they take that card out and they put it in a rack by the print farm. And then that's an indicator to everybody in the company, we need this part. And then that part gets printed as long as that card is on that rack, that part gets printed. Once the level of that part has gotten up to a new level, there's like a green line in the bin. We know we have enough to last us for a while, and the card comes back. It's like a universal way of like anyone can walk in over the print farm and see that some prints are done and flip the prints and know what's needed. It's like, it doesn't have to live in someone's head. It's just a universal system where we keep track of what's needed. And it's been working pretty well so far. The swap to V4 was tough because we had to refill all our buckets on new parts. And like,
And
I think we're
everything.
We need everything. And like,
Yeah.
I think we're still kind of working on climbing our way out of that. Maybe that's why we're buying some more printers too.
Yeah. Presently, we feel a need to have like a rack of cards that are the most important or the more ASAP or urgent ones. And like, if we find ourselves with 20 cards on the rack and they're all important, we probably need more printers.
Maybe we should like dedicate half the rack to like, oh dear Lord, please, I need this now. And then other ones that are like, yeah, when you get to it, that we should like trial run that.
Yeah. The idea of that was antithetical to like the Kanban system.
Yeah.
At first when we were trying it. But it, like, there's always a hot job in a factory.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. Yeah. And it's antithetical because like, if there's one thing that's more urgent than another, you should make your Kanban level in the bin higher. Nothing should ever be urgent. As soon as it goes beneath that level, you should have enough in that bin before you can recoup it. And if not, make the level higher. Like, it's a failure of how you set up the system. But in reality, it's more messy than that. And like what we're doing, parts are consumed in weird quantities and like prints fail and like stuff gets more messy than that. So it might be useful to try it. We should try it. Just see what it's like.
I could see it. Yeah. The one on the line was asking for it. And I was like, oh, we have to have a good think about this. And more printers and maybe a tiny, tiny little hot job section.
Yeah.
It can hold 3 cards.
Maybe we could just honestly, maybe with more printers, we keep trying this for a little while with more printers and see if the total number of Kanban cards just comes down, which it should. And then the normal system will work again.
That's probably the case.
Let's try that. Well, I don't know. We'll just see. We'll mess around with it.
Figure it out.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah, that's the long and short of 3D printing.
That's the long and short of running the farm. What to print, how to manage it, have a bin for each part.
Oh, yeah. Being a farmer is a modest work.
It's not much, but it's honest work.
Yeah.
I love it in the morning. Like whoever comes in first to the office will flip the farm. And I just imagine them in overalls with a piece of wheat in their mouth every morning, just like they're doing the farming, you know? It's great. But yeah, it's a lot to run one. Like it's not, there's a lot of benefits to injection molding. Like it's really cool to be able to have the ability to flip a design really quickly. But when something gets stable, injection molding is great. But all our parts are designed for 3D printing too, because we want the community to be able to make them indefinitely. So also a little at odds with that. Like we'd have to change the design of like the feeder frame very seriously to injection mold it. So it's just like, I don't know. Like there's a time and a place to switch away from it, but it's been a pretty good tool. Sometimes it's a project, but it works pretty darn well for us. Like I'm very happy with what a print farm means for us to run.
I feel the same. There's definitely a pull towards injection molding. It's like, it's a more standard thing. It's more consistent.
Yeah.
It's meant for higher volume but like mid-scale manufacturing, straddles some parts in your supply chain are a high volume thing and some are you need 300 a year.
Right.
And like for 3D printing, it helps us manage that like varying demand across our part consumptions.
Yep. And as we continue to grow, it's like we're more and more going on the higher end of mid-scale, lower end of mass production.
Yeah.
Like we're kind of starting to nip at the heels of that a little bit. And we're seeing kind of the other side of mid-scale, which is really cool. But, you know, we're like, injection molding's looking pretty good. You know, we're kind of at that quantity now where it'd be cool to give that a try. So I don't know. It's very interesting.
I think as advice to people listening, I'd say, be willing to like get quotes on having something tooled. Maybe get quotes on making this giant print you dread built out of sheet metal or an extrusion, because you might realize that you're in a volume where it makes sense to leave 3D printing behind. And like, it's not impossible to create a community accessible variant of a tooled part.
Yeah.
That's 3D printable still.
Or you could make a separate version that's 3D printable. Yeah. You could have a printable version of a part, and then there's an entirely separate CAD model that's for injection molding. And that's okay too. You know, it's like, yeah, this is the way we have to make it at scale. But if you want to make it yourself and you only have a printer, here's the way you do it with the printer.
And that's based.
That's super rad. That's a super cool way to do it. So, and I think you said this at the top of the show, but you'd be surprised how cheap you can get a mold for. Like under $1,000, like even just a few $100, you can get an aluminum mold up to good for like a few thousand shots. and it's not a mirror finish part or anything. It's like a nice matte finish or whatever, and it's fine. And you're not going to spend that much money on it. It's like pretty accessible. Find a vendor on Alibaba, get chatting with them, send them a 3D model, get a quote. You might be totally blown away how cheap it is.
Definitely true. I've been surprised hearing friends just tell me how little they pay for parts I'd think were crazy expensive.
Yeah.
So you never know.
Mm-hmm.
Don't make assumptions here.
Don't make assumptions, but it's also, if you have a part injection molded, it makes it way harder to justify deciding to change the design. It's really easy for us to change a design here, and we do it all the time because we're always improving things. But when you're like, I have money tied up in a mold, I have to do all this communication to get it going, and I'll update all this stuff. It makes you not want to make changes as much. So I think it makes sense to switch once things are like really fully baked. Once it's like, no, this is the design. Like, this is what it should be. Maybe then you switch over.
Where like the next change to your product is a new version sold as V2 or something.
Yeah.
Like if you feel that cozy with it, maybe injection mold something. Try it out.
Yep. Yeah.
3D printing is pretty rad.
It's
like
pretty
it a lot.
rad. Yeah, it works. It's worked really well for us so far.
All right, folks, that's it for this one. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. It helps us out a ton. You can learn more about Opulo at opulo.io, as well as on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and now Blue Sky. You can email us at podcast@opulo.io with questions or comments on the episode. Keep up to date with the podcast and Opulo. Sign up for the newsletter where we write blog posts and conduct customer interviews with other folks building open hardware. That's it, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thanks, everybody.
See ya.
Would you like to begin? Would you like me to begin? Do you want me to just lead in? We need to do our vocal warm-up exercises.
We've been talking.
Mommy made me mash my M&Ms, Papa. Mommy made me mash my M&Ms, Papa.